Why do 80% of buyers in China choose Tesla versus other manufacturers of EVs? This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. Also want to thank our Patreon supporters as well as subscribers. Your participation makes a huge difference and we greatly appreciate it. So if you do like the show, please take time to like and subscribe. So interestingly, today's show we've been sort of working on for the last 3 weeks and haven't gotten it done. So I'm kind of excited to finally post the show for that reason. So one of the things that's going on right now is that Tesla is increasingly leveraged to China. And so what this means is that, for example, if China delivers, let's say 150,000 Tesla vehicles this year from that factory, it adds perhaps, $150 to $200 to the stock price from where it is now. If Tesla delivers 250,000 vehicles, it might add, let's say, $300 to the stock price. If that facility delivers 500,000 vehicles, let's say over the next year and a half, that basically doubles the stock price of Tesla. So because of how this leverage process works, we felt that is a pretty important thing to do coverage of kind of what's going on in this sector. So that said, one of the biggest questions that's lurking under that umbrella is why would 80% of Chinese choose to go with Tesla products? And so that's the kind of focus of the first part of the show today, and we're going to run through some data on that. So this is kind of left field, but I used to have a Volvo wagon, and I found it interesting because after I had the car for a year, and then 2 years, and then 3 years, and 4 years, I'd watch the want ads to see how many people were selling theirs and what the demand was, basically. So one of the ways you can see whether or not you have a good car and consumer perception of it is how many of them are for sale. And that answer is if there are none of them, or if the ones that are for sale are extremely high value, then it's a sign that you have a great car. The US example of that would be, take a look at Toyotas 6 months, a year, 2 years after they're purchased, and you'll notice that they have very, very high resale values, reflecting customer experience, number one. Number two, marginal utility, meaning how many of those people that have those vehicles feel that it's an excellent solution for what they need, so they don't want to sell it, hence higher prices. So I bring all of this up because there's an article in a publication called Quartz in September of 2019. And what we were specifically looking for and found in this article is a whole list of reasons why consumers in China at a very, very high rate first choose luxury or foreign brands, and then they're specifically moving over to Tesla as Tesla enters the market at a reasonable price point. So part of what this does is it cleans up a whole bunch of questions that are lurking regarding to what extent can Tesla both enter the Chinese market, deliver and sell cars during a down market for the Chinese economy and for cars in general. And so this sort of captures all of that sort of in one ball, hence the reason why we were sort of wanting to do this show. So the first issue that pops up in China is that every time there's an announcement of the size of the Chinese market, how many vehicles are being sold, all these data points, there's a fascinating circumstance happening, which is why is it, well, given the size of the market, let's say it's 1.5 million vehicles each year, and supposedly it's a down market right now, kind of why would Tesla want to enter, et cetera. So the first issue that pops up is that about 80% of the manufacturers in China, and I think there are probably 40 or 50 left from the 500 they started with, but in terms of significant ones, there's probably a top 10 with BYD being the largest. So one of the things that's never mentioned in the news that we've always found interesting is that most of these folks have never manufactured a car or an EV, but started 5 years ago and is now selling product. And so there's this challenge of, do you understand how to build a car, and then do you know how to build all the parts to the car, and then can you get it finished through manufacturing? So what's happening is a lot of the Chinese companies have entered, and they're kind of on a curve, I guess upward, that allows them to be able to operate in this business and potentially operate long-term and successfully. So what this has wrought is a number of issues have come up. So one of them is that consumers are saying, what about the warranties? So what's been happening is companies that are brand new, the first iteration of their cars was coming out with about 100 miles of range, and so maybe 120. And so consumers were on a limited basis interested in that, especially if it's on a very, very low price point and they can't get anything but electric vehicles in a reasonable amount of time, because ICE is being made difficult to get a hold of, or internal combustion engines have a lot of extra fees and a lot of extra waiting time, as in years. So there's incentives for the consumers to make that switch that the Chinese government has installed. So what ended up happening is there's a nest of issues that have popped up. Number one is that people 3 years out that decide to sell their vehicle are finding that it's hard to sell it because there's no warranty. Along with no warranty, or the warranties run out, they're finding that the spare parts are either slim to none to get access to. So another reason why, again, Tesla is sort of the choice that's being made by people, even if you're paying more to get that quality. The third issue is the existence of the company. As we said before, China sort of put together as many as 500 of these companies that it was helping to fund to try to build its sort of EV presence within the country. And a lot of these entities have started to disappear for whatever reason, but part of the calculus that those buyers have to make is, will the company I just bought my car from be in existence next year or 2 years for the warranty parts and all the other issues that we just described? And so you kind of ended up in this position where there are a large number of people who are now saying, hey, I might want to buy EV, and I guess I would be inclined to buy a Chinese EV, but because of all the list of problems that I just described, there's it doesn't look like a good idea. Another variable that's in the minds of all consumers around the globe, especially in this case the Chinese folks, is something that's called the network effect. So what that is, as we've discussed in the past, is the fact that when you have Tesla in the country for, let's say, the last 5 years, and yes, the cars are very expensive, but what's been happening is that even if you can't buy that vehicle, there are 10 people 20 people 100 people family members, et cetera, that own the car and that could afford the very high price and are very happy with it. So when you have that long-term brand relationship at a high level with consumers, even if they can't afford it yet, they now are making that switch over because they recognize that this is a great solution for us, and therefore we need to make that switch. So what you're starting to get the idea of here is the fact that Tesla can enter a marketplace, and I was fascinated. There's a bunch of articles that have come out about this being Tesla's moment of truth when it comes to China, and I feel like the moment of truth for Tesla was 5 years ago when all those consumers started trying out Tesla cars and the charging stations, et cetera, and confirmed that it's sort of the best of breed in the electric space. And so everything we're seeing now, including the manufacturing in China, is a follow-on of the brand building that Tesla has been doing since day one. And the brand is sitting out there as an idea, and then people are saying, we like that idea, and now we have a chance at $42,000 to buy that idea versus just look at it drive by at $150,000 because we just didn't have those kind of numbers. So there's another key data point that we came across in the article from Quartz, and what it related to us is the fact that when it comes to electric vehicles, for people who sell used cars in China, they specifically focused on one dealer who they visited, And what he explained was the only electric vehicle we buy or sell is Tesla. And so this gets into some numbers that we've presented in the past, which is that in the first year, Tesla is experiencing 70% value retention, and after 3 years, the vehicle is still worth 60% of its original value. So how does this compare with other entities? It turns out that the nearest Chinese competitor is at 54% after 1 year, and the average Chinese competitor is at about 35% market value after 1 year. So as one of our viewers pointed out when we presented this previously, those data points start to sneak into things like, what if you have a lease on the vehicle? How do the leasing companies handle it? And so it's just an interesting circumstance because there's this phenomenon going on where Tesla is entering the country in a really, really strong position based on all the issues that consumers are having with other competitor EV products. And then we've already covered the point that, there's some data you could look at, which is like above $100,000, Tesla has 100% of the cars sold in that space. Below $30,000, Tesla has none of the cars sold in that space. And let's say between 30,000 and let's say 80,000, that's about 25% of the car market in China. And in that marketplace, the luxury brands of BMW and Mercedes and then VW Audi a little bit sort of sneaks into that space successfully. So we were kind of intrigued by the fact that as Tesla enters China, there's a whole bunch of data points that belie the company perhaps not doing well. One, we have an EV market that's shrinking because the subsidies have declined. Two, in general, the Chinese economy has been hurt by the tariff issues, et cetera. So there's a lot of supposed headwinds to Tesla's success that are worth noting. And in this video, we were really trying to rotate through some of the issues that seem to be going on relative to Tesla right now. So all that said, there's other data. So what's also interesting for us is there's a battle between sort of different data points. And as these points are definitively answered, we're seeing dramatic shifts in the value of Tesla in very short periods of time. Large amounts of value is being delivered to the company. And some of the questions about Chinese demand, et cetera, are lurking. So we were impressed, frankly. Now Model 3s are supposedly a 10-week wait in China versus 8 or 9 a week or two ago. So the Chinese consumers are responding very strongly. One of the other points that we didn't make on our list was that the Chinese government does have a rule where they're trying to push EVs in general and Tesla fairly hard. And so we're in a situation right now where there's a lot of demand because there are a lot of consumers who aren't allowed to buy ICE vehicles anymore. And China has sort of enforced this rule and then brought in Tesla as a solution in sort of the high end to give people good options. So there seems to be a pretty good partnership going between Tesla and the Chinese government to deliver solutions that folks might want. So we're in the zone where, one of the, so there's a concept called models. And so we're in a very model-driven environment right now when it comes to sort of analysts and looking at stocks, et cetera. So one of the reasons why we kept repeating that 80% market share situation is that's about what the EV market share for Tesla is in the US and in Europe. And then we think it'll end up in China as well. And once you look at that model, at that percentage of market share for Tesla's zone of competition, that equals a huge amount of cars being sold. So there are lurking sort of, this ain't going to happen, if you will, against that. For example, does Tesla have enough batteries that could be produced at the plant to deliver 200, 250, 300,000 vehicles? Do they have the battery capacity in Fremont to deliver the high-end vehicles that complement the low-end vehicles that are being produced in China? there are all these questions that are lurking out there. So we actually have a show coming up, and it was interesting to see notes coming across the screen from friends discussing Tesla and the 29th announcement of earnings. So one of the nice things that is coming up on the 29th with earnings is there'll be a bunch of answers to, well, Tesla won't directly answer demand in China, but there'll be a bunch of answers regarding where batteries are being produced and perhaps how many, to help everyone get a good grasp of how Tesla's going to do in this coming year, given the number of new products they have coming, given the expansion that they're doing in China, et cetera. The sort of structure and positioning is pretty amazing. One of the we have a few constant comments that are coming across or requests from different viewers. And one of them that I thought was really interesting that I was thinking about this morning was that there are a number of folks who are talking about patent stealing issues. And a few points come up regarding that in China. Number one, Tesla deliberately did 75% of their patents open, and China was the main reason, we believe. Number two, with those patents open, Tesla gave Chinese companies an opportunity to use them to deliver product. And the product they've delivered, obviously the consumers are okay with, but not thrilled. Hence, there's still room for Tesla. Number three, and that's really fascinating, is one of our viewers, I think he's in the US now, but he's from China. He was saying, well, it's possible that the Chinese government one day could say, we think that all of the Tesla vehicles should now be, all the Tesla executives should be loaded on a plane and marched to the airport and asked to leave the country. And so what if something like that actually occurred? And that's actually an excellent question. And illustrating the point of the patents and the fact that you could have a factory built and it could be simply just handed over. And there's one little point that's an answer to that eventuality, and that is the fact that software. So every aspect of the car is software driven, especially the thermal management system, which is the advantage when it comes to Tesla's batteries. So in essence, if you can either remove or stop the software operation on those vehicles, they're actually anvils, they're no longer cars. So we wanted to bring this up because we believe that there's a valid concern about, will China allow Tesla to be as successful as it can be? And ultimately, because of its software orientation, Tesla has a way to control how this whole thing might work out, short and long term. So thank you, all of you that always get me on the China patent issues, and it's a valid concern, but it's definitely been thought through by the folks at Tesla, and I don't think it's a big deal for the reason I just described, but definitely a valid concern. We're at about 18 right now, and wanted to encourage you to pose questions that we could field before we close out for the day. The next thing that I wanted to sneak into briefly, but we'll get into more going forward, is, right now, the 29th is when next earnings come out, and then Elon's going to answer a lot of questions that will shape the view of Tesla over the next year or two. And what we were intrigued by is that over the past, let's say, 10 days, a big thing popped up, which is modeling that was done relative to the impact of robocars, and the fact that just off that model, you ended up with like 50 to 75 points added to the value of Tesla. And as this gets closer and they start talking about it at Tesla, it could add $200 or $200 in stock price value to the value of Tesla. And that is the fact that 80% margins on the robo-taxis would put Tesla in a very strong profit position from that aspect. And it's something that Tesla is preparing for, but maybe others are not in this EV space. So we decided to bring this up because, not for sure, but there is this very interesting pot being boiled right now. And what the pot basically suggests is that as we enter that 29th, Tesla could be down 50, 75, 100 points. There's also the possibility that if Elon answers the questions that are on the table and the market likes them and can modify their models to what we're going to see, Tesla's stock price could jump up 200, 300 points in a week. or effectively double in 4 or 5 trading days, especially when you add in things like what's going on with the shorts and they're having to protect themselves. So the model-based world of investing now means that there are entities like Tesla that can experience explosive moves of their stock price in relatively short periods of time because there are bits of information that can big time shape what's going on here. Also impacting this is Tesla's, I want to say, gamesmanship. It's kind of an interesting thing to watch because most companies tend to reveal information incrementally so that the markets can adjust to whatever the information might be. But Tesla likes to drop nuclear bombs, and those nuclear bombs result in dramatic shifts, not unlike what happened with the earnings announcement last time and how that affected the stock because all those models went nuts when they predicted Tesla would lose money and the company actually made money. So now you had this, Tesla's profitable, that the model shift that's associated results in a rocketing stock price. And so now we come to China, and all the questions that I posed to you about what China can and cannot do are variables that will influence what happens to the stock in the short and long term. But you can have sort of long-term gains show up in a very short period of time. So, at any rate, Harry just pointed out Tesla typically moves up about 8% after earnings. Martin just posed a question about solar leases. And I think it's funny because, Martin, I think the solar is great, but until Elon starts installing the 1,000 a week he promised, we aren't going to see that the number be big enough to affect things beyond what's going on with the cars. It's just too small a revenue hit given how car sales hit that line. So we have an interesting circumstance. I want to call it T minus. So today's the 18th. So T minus 11 and counting in terms of liftoff. So we feel that, this could be Tesla's liftoff in terms of how things move. Sort of the next show we're moving into is the fact that this number is burning in my brain. 569,000 cars is how many Mercedes were sold in China, let's say last year. And so as Tesla enters in a strong way, Chinese EV manufacturers are going to get run over, but we're also going to see the sales relied upon by the big OEMs of Europe start to get sort of eaten backwards, from China to Germany in terms of market share being taken by Tesla. So our next show is actually focused on will the Model 3 bankrupt Daimler, VW, or BMW? And part of the conversation is how are things going to play out in China relative to this? And, can the big OEMs, particularly of Europe, defend themselves as Tesla enters? At any rate, wanted to thank all of you for joining us. I saw Donovan out there, Harry. There are a number of you that posed questions, and we appreciate that. We appreciate the hellos as well. As you'll notice, we're trying to get better at focusing on the show at hand because most of our viewers see this afterwards and therefore don't have an opportunity to see it in this fashion. Richard Moore, 20,000 margin, 200,000 cars in China equals $4 billion. Those are pretty good numbers, and I think those are possibilities. Yeah, one of the other question marks that's out there too, and we're going to be finding out what the answer is we know that the cars are being built in China, and we've started seeing Chinese suppliers coming in, and we're seeing Tesla try to move to 100% Chinese suppliers. And one of the other questions that pops up is that they're still selling U.S.-produced cars against the Chinese vehicles, and the experience consumers have with both types of cars is going to also be an impacting variable about whether people will choose to buy the Chinese Tesla or not, and also impact the number that will be sold. At any rate, wanted to again thank you. Don't forget 25 leg lifts. Try the 5-2 diet or some of the other ones that are out there. Also wanted to encourage you to fried foods no more than once a week. Also wanted to suggest that you not go to bed within 2 hours of eating, preferably 4 to let the food digest. Anyway, Thanks once again for joining us. Tschüss, German, au revoir, French, lehit road, Hebrew, choda hafez, Farsi, the Virginia, Polish. Um, as I got to Poland just now, I was just kind of shocked. I saw some data points where I was just amazed how short the distance from Poland to Germany is, but how lower it is to build things. So unbelievable. Any rate, in Chinese, ni hao ma, hello, zdravstvuyte, hello in Russian. And in Jamaica, we say, no respect, walk good man. Thanks for joining us. Please remember to like and subscribe and have a great day. And bye for now.